I am Chris Pope. Some of you guys may know me as the Space Pope. I'm involved in the Space Quest series with Mark and Scott. Except, you didn't know there's a new game. There actually is a new game. We're working on it right now. It's called Space Venture, but we're not here to talk about that. I think you guys are here for some guy. I think his name is Al. Is that right? Al Lowe, the maker of Leisure Suit Larry.
Thank you.
Come right through these curtains here, Al.
Well, I was going to walk among my people.
So I'm going to moderate the panel with Al. We're going to talk about Leisure Suit Larry. I'll probably ask him some questions, but then we'll open it up and let you guys ask some questions as well if you guys would like. And then don't forget, we are in the Walk of Fame area until Monday. So if you guys want to get something signed, take a picture or whatever, come by the Walk of Fame and we'll be there until Monday. All right.
Hi, Atlanta. So how close do I need to be? Can you hear me if I talk like this?
A little bit closer.
Okay, I'll work harder.
Testing one.
Yeah. I can use my FM voice. Well, it's a pleasure to be here today. I'm really excited about this show. It's my first time at DragonCon, and boy, am I impressed. What a cool thing this is. I love it. So yeah, Chris got me involved here, and I owe it all to him. He's recommended me attending this show, and so far it's been great. And I'm so glad to see so many people here today. I was assuming that we would be talking to a room full of 3 or 4 people. So this is wonderful. I really have.
This is not the Walking Dead panel. So.
Although I kind of look like the one that could be part of that. I used to say in the 80s that I was the world's oldest living game designer, and hell, now I am. It didn't work out right. I turned 71 last month. Applauding the fact that I'm still alive. I love that.
It's no easy feat this day and age.
Well, it's true. Yeah, it's true. Anyway, so I'm here to answer questions. I have a presentation tomorrow that I hope that you'll attend. It's at 4:30.
4 o'clock.
4 o'clock.
And, we're going to do a panel involving just Sierra in general. Later, we're going to talk about a lot of the games, Space Quest, Police Quest, King's Quest, all that good stuff.
And I've got a lot of slides, a lot of pictures to show, and we'll talk a little bit about the history of Sierra and how it started on a kitchen table and grew to be a $1 billion corporation that was then stolen by federal convicts and taken away from Ken and Roberta Williams and all of us stockholders, people who actually own shares of stock, by guys who were later convicted criminals and are now breaking big rocks into little ones in a federal penitentiary. So that story's tomorrow, though. But I hope you'll come back, because it's a good tale. I mean, I keep trying to find somebody to write a book about it, because it really is a fascinating American business success, rags to riches to to nothing, actually, at the end.
Ken Williams is doing okay.
Ken came out fine, but a lot of us did. But the company itself was what I learned was it started out at nothing and grew to a huge thing, and then kind of vanished into the ether. There's still a Sierra logo, but it's kind of randomly applied to boxes.
We'll talk a little bit too just about the Kickstarter movement and some of the people involved in trying to bring Sierra back somewhat. Not that you could ever truly bring back what Sierra once was, but and it is like Al said, I don't think a lot of people realize the company was literally stolen from Ken Williams. I think a lot of people may know about there was some cooking of the books that occurred, but he wasn't involved in all that. But the company was actually stolen from him. when it was all said and done.
They have a nicer term for it on Wall Street. It's called a hostile takeover, But what that means is, yeah, I'm gonna get this. But that's not why we're here. We're here to talk about my friend Larry.
You'll have to come to the panel tomorrow.
Yeah. We're here to talk about my friend Larry, who turned 30 last June 5th. I know, 30 years ago. It's hard to imagine. I remember 30 years ago last May, driving home from Sierra's offices to my home, which was about a 45-minute drive or something. I was listening to National Public Radio, and they had a story about Irving Berlin's 100th birthday or 99th birthday or something like that, and they played a song of his called Alexander's Ragtime Band, and I thought, man, that's a goofy song. That I should do something like that as the theme song for Leisure Suit Larry, because there's no music or anything, and I probably should have a theme song, and it won't really matter because the game will go out, and 3 months later nobody will remember it. It'll be over with. So I got home from work and asked my wife, well, how long before dinner? And she said, oh, it'll be about 20 minutes. And I said, oh, okay, well, let me see if I can write a song that fast. And so I sat down at the synthesizer, and in 1987, I actually had a synthesizer hooked up to a Macintosh with a little 9-inch screen, black and white screen, and a keyboard. I had a Yamaha DX7 II stereo. It was stereo synthesizer in my living room. And so I wrote this song, and she called me to dinner and goes, yeah, I think that's good enough. It doesn't matter. And if I'd have known 30 years later people would still be whistling it and stuff, who thought I should have spent more time? I should have taken better care. But I decided that the game needed something, and because it was a different kind of game, I didn't want it to have the typical. Actually, at that point in the 80s, the soundtracks were heavily techno stuff. It was a lot of techno music. And I thought, well, that's just not right for a goofy guy like Larry. He should have something kind of goofy song. And so I wrote a song that had, for you musicians out there, it had a lot of major thirds and major sixths in it. And kind of an old, and literally inspired by listening to that story on NPR about Irving Berlin and Alexander's Ragtime Band and stuff, and so that's kind of put the seed in my brain, and I wrote the story that way, and we slapped it into the game, and most people heard it through one of those crappy tweakers, that were on the little horrible thing that went boop when you turned the machine on, because that's all people had back then. Later on, Sierra really pumped MIDI, promoted MIDI. In fact, I remember when we first talked about doing games with MIDI, we called up the MIDI Institute of America, whatever that was. It turned out to be a secretary in an office in LA, and that was the total business. And we said, well, do you have any books on MIDI? Is there any way we can learn about this? And she said, well, I can send you the spec. And she sent us the spec, and I'll never forget the first page of it was, we define a bit as a positive voltage. It was like, holy crap, we got a long way to go here, don't we? But that's where we started with MIDI, was the definition of bits and how to do all that stuff. And it wasn't until 6 years, maybe 5 years after that we convinced Roland to make a MIDI card for, they made MIDI cards. We convinced them to make a cheap synthesizer and combine it with a MIDI card and sell it for only $1,000, I think it was. And we tried to convince them to add a digital to audio converter chip. It didn't have a DAC chip, but we thought that if you added a DAC chip, that you'd be able to play back samples. And the guy from Roland said, no, if I do that, that'll cannibalize our marketplace. and we'll never sell any more samplers and stuff. And it was like, well, wait, you want to sell $100,000 devices, and we're talking about selling $1 million $100 devices. Do you see the difference in the numbers there? And he said, no, I don't want to do that. And so Roland could have been the sound blaster, I guess, of the industry, but ended up, he took a different choice. But that's a different story. So anyway, Larry turned 30, and when the game shipped, it was an odd time for Sierra. Sierra was in financial difficulties. They had several periods like that. Well, a big one in the '84, when one Friday morning Sierra had 120 employees, and by Friday afternoon it had 40 employees. That was a tough day. That was the day I got fired. I had just quit a job as a school teacher, where it's almost impossible to get fired. I have never heard of anybody being fired, and so I started work at Sierra. And 6 months later, Ken Williams called me into his office, and he said, we're short of cash, and if I continue to pay you as a salary, if I continue your salary, you will be an expense to the company. Whereas if I paid you in advances against future royalties, you would be a prepaid asset, and you'd be over on this side of the books instead of on the bad side of the books. I said, okay, well, how much are we talking about as far as prepaid advances are concerned? And he rattled off, well, I want this much for Winnie the Pooh, and I want you to do this much for Donald Duck's Playground, and I'll pay you this much for this. And it was like, if I added it all up, it was like double what I was making on salary. And so I wasn't really sure, because as I said, I was a school teacher. I said, well, okay, Ken, have I just been fired? And he said, yeah. And I said, okay, great, thanks. And I shook his hand. And for the next 15 and a half years, I was an outside contractor. I was not an employee of Sierra. I worked on contract basis from game to game. And I worked on my royalties. I worked off of, like a book author does. If the games didn't sell, I didn't get any money. But if they did sell, I did better. So it turned out to be a great decision for me at the time. And then somewhere about 3 years or 4 years after that, about the time that we started working on the Larry project, he was in financial trouble again. He said, well, I know how you take these advances and you live off these advances, and then you get a royalty. He said, but if you took no advances, I could give you a lot bigger royalty rate. In other words, with risk comes reward. I go, well, okay, I like the idea of more money. More money sounds good. And he said, okay, well, how about if we do this for this new game you're working on, Larry 1. He said, you do it completely without any money, and then when we sell it, you'll get a big percentage. I said, okay, but I need an artist to help me on that. And he said, well, you can't have Jerry, because Jerry's Christian. And he said, you can't use Louise because, well, she's a woman, and you can't have whoever the other one was, and the only one left was Mark Crow. And he said, but Mark Crow's working full-time on Space Quest 1. And he said, well, let's call Mark in here. Let's see what we can do. So he called Mark in, and he said, look, Mark, I don't want you to stop working on Space Quest. You work on that for 40 hours a week, okay? And then in the evenings and on weekends, work on Al's game. And if you do, I'll give you this big royalty. Because it wasn't costing him any money, right? It was just royalty. It was just a percentage of the sales. And Mark said, okay. You didn't know anything. He was like 18 years old or something, 19 years old. And
And so anyway, okay, sure. So he worked 40 hours a week on Space Quest with Scott Murphy, and he worked evenings and weekends on Larry. And for me, he did all of the background art, all of the animation, the box design, the credit screens, everything. He did everything for that game. And they said, if you finish it, Al needs his stuff in a hurry. So if you finish it in, I don't know, 2 months, we'll give you this rate. But if you finish it in 6 weeks, we'll give you more. And if you finish it in a month, we'll give you even more than that. And so he said, I'll get it done in a month. So he got it done in a month, and he ended up getting a pretty nice house out of it. Nobody knew it at the time, because when the game shipped, it was the worst selling product in the history of Sierra. We thought it was going to be a big deal because it was developed from the design that Chuck Benton did for Soft Porn, a game that was huge in 1981 when Time magazine started its column on computers and how computers were invading the home, and there were such a thing as home computers now. Well, half that column was about people doing accounting or spreadsheets or something, but the other half was about soft porn. And the only picture in that column was Roberta Williams naked in a hot tub, that famous photo from the cover. So anyway, I got off track. I just lost my train of thought.
You were talking about.
Oh yeah, so yes, we're selling. So during development of this, Ken kept saying, "Oh yeah, make it dirty. It's fine. You can make it dirty." And I go, "Okay, well I can't make it too dirty because I got a wife and kids, and so it's not going to be really dirty." Yeah, okay. And then when we got ready to sell it, Ken was like, "I don't know, this is pretty dirty." I'm like, "Wait a minute, damn it, you said." So anyway, when the game shipped, it didn't get any advertising, it didn't get any marketing, it didn't get any publicity, it didn't get anything. Nobody mentioned it. They just kind of slipped it into the catalog, and they shipped it out to a few stores. And that was it. So it was the worst selling title in the history of the company. When Sierra, a normal title back then, Sierra would ship 50,000 copies or so the first month. Larry sold 4. Oh my! So I kind of looked at Mark Crow and we kind of went, well, we just wasted our time, didn't we? There was nothing to do. So Jim Walls was in trouble with Police Quest. He had a programmer on the project that was having trouble getting it finished. And so they said, well, Al, can you go check out Police Quest? Maybe you can help them get that done. So I immediately stopped thinking about Larry, didn't enter my mind, just kind of gave up hope and went over and started working with Jim. And we ended up moving into a house together, the 3 of us that were working on the project, and we just worked round the clock, 24 hours a day, and got that game done in time to ship in time for Christmas. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to me, Larry just kept growing in sales. The numbers just kept doubling every month until after 12 months the game had been out. It was on the top 10 sales charts with a bullet, meaning it was a rising star. It was like people were just discovering. But the whole success of Larry came about, well, now you would call it viral. It's the word spread around. But back then, we didn't know what viral was. So back then, it was just luck. But everything was word of mouth, and sales just kept growing and growing and growing until they got to the point where they said, "Well, you better do another game. I think you this game's a hit. You finished Police Quest. I think you should dive in and do another Larry game." Okay. So I thought, well, Larry was trying to get laid, so I can't do that again. That would be the same story. So I said, well, now he's looking for love. So I quickly learned after the game was shipped and that didn't sell as well as the first one, that maybe consumers weren't looking for love so much as they were getting laid. So Larry 3 was all about getting laid, and but it was a fun experience for me. I got to go immediately from Larry 2, and Larry 2. I don't know how we're going to get into this thing, but Larry 2 I designed because Larry 1 was so big that it wouldn't fit on one 5 1/4-inch floppy disk. It took 2 360K on each one of them, and you couldn't fit it all on one of them. So anyway, but the way it was designed, you had to do a lot of moving around between locations and stuff, and so you were constantly doing this, taking a disc out, putting a disc in, taking a disc out, putting it in. So I thought, for Larry 2, I know that this is a problem. I'll design it so that everything fits on a disc. So the first disc was Los Angeles, and when you got everything there, you got ready to go on the ship, then the ship was disc 2, and you didn't have to go back and forth between all. In fact, you couldn't go back and forth between all. Now, the rumor that I purposefully set you up so that you could leave Los Angeles without everything you needed is true. I thought that was a good puzzle. Turns out that people hated me for it. I don't know. You guess. Sometimes you guess right.
What was it with Sierra making games so fundamentally difficult back in the day?
Well, we didn't make them difficult. You just weren't that smart. No, it's not true. Before the internet, there was an entirely different system, because now you would just go to Google and say, well, how do I get past the spinach dip or something, one of those great, the bridle on the snake, one of those puzzles. And but back then, God, you just sat there and typed crap until your fingers bled, and eventually, and part of it was that we didn't all have the same vocabulary. We put down the words that we would use. Those weren't always the words that you would use, So as we built synonyms and as we built a better parsing mechanisms. By the way, I read a lot of stuff that says talks about parsers back then. We didn't have a parser, We had a string of characters, and hopefully there was a space in there someplace, and that would mean we had 2 words, this word and that word. And boy, it's good if this one's a verb. It would be good if this one was a noun. And then we would go down the list of verbs, which was literally like a spreadsheet, picture spreadsheet with a number over here and a word over here. And occasionally you would have more words in more columns here. So if word number 6 was the glass, well then, there might be 6 glass, and then over another cell there might be water or ice or something else or whatever, I don't know, mug, cup, thing. So there would be synonyms that were the equivalent of that word. So in case you didn't type that in, but that's all there was. It was pretty simplistic stuff. I mean, and it was hard to do that. I'm not putting down the guys that wrote the parser, but it wasn't true. So anyway, I designed Larry 2 so that you would have a certain number of things to do in disc 1, and then you'd put that away, and you could run the whole rest of the game on disc 2 until you ran out of that, and then you put 3. And I think it ended up with 5 discs, maybe something like that. And then finally for Larry 3, it was like, just get a hard drive. It's not worth it. Stop doing it. So nobody after that bothered to design a game for floppy disks. It just didn't happen. Well, so when Larry 3 came out, I thought, well, I want to do something different. I want to do something that nobody's done before. And I thought it would be interesting to have Larry change characters and go from one person and then in the middle of the game change to another person. And as far as I know, that was the first game that did that. That had, like that changed protagonists in the middle of the stream. Because once you played as Larry for a while, I had this wonderful scene that I was so proud of, where you played Larry for 2.5 games, and suddenly he gets up and leaves the screen. and wait a second, what am I doing? Oh, I'm controlling a girl. What the hell? I've got a woman now. And so the last half of the game you played is Passionate Patty. But I was happy with the way the game ended. I thought that I would, kind of bring it all home. I was always a big fan of Mel Brooks and Blazing Saddles, and how the end of that movie, they stumbled out of the movie set and into the Busby Berkeley musical number, and into the commissary, and they had a pie fight and all that crap. And I thought, well, it would be kind of funny to do that and have people fall out of the game and be in Sierra and see how we make games. And of course, it was all lies and fake, But anyway, I thought it was a fun ending, and Larry ended up meeting Ken Williams, and Ken offered him a job. And the last scene of the game, Larry's sitting down at his Apple II computer, and he says, Patty, I think I'll start this game outside a little bar called Lefty's. And I actually digitized the code from Larry 1 and put it on the little screen in the animation. So if you see the animation go by, that's the real code that I wrote for that scene in the game. That was just an inside joke, but that was fun. So then I had Larry all happy. He was married to his love, and he had a job, and he had a nice house on a lake, and everything was perfect. And I kind of put a big ribbon around it and tied a bow, and that was done, because no movie or book or game ever had more than a trilogy. You do 3, that was it. I never heard of a part 4 or part 5, well, of course today that's all you get, but back then I thought that was it and we were done. So a few months later, I started work on a project that was really stupid. If you ever played Ultima Online, we thought we could do that in 1990 with 1,200 baud modems, and we didn't know that there was an internet. We had no idea that T1 lines existed. We just got like 20 different phone lines, and we hooked up modems inside IBM PC chassis, and we stacked them and connected one to the next with patch cables, and oh my god, it was horrible. Anyway, but we did it. We actually made it work, and we were trying to create a multiplayer online adventure game. Well, the game development guys were pretty slow getting all that stuff done, so Ken said, well, why don't you write checkers, chess, and backgammon and stuff, and just give some people something to do. That'll give us something while you're waiting for them. Okay, so I did those 3 games, and he said, well, you really need a way to tell people apart online, and just using, back then BBSs just used a little handle. You create a handle of some sort. And he said, you remember that game Facemaker back in the early 80s, the educational product? He said, why don't you make a little Facemaker kind of thing, and then people can design their own faces and put them in this online adventure game. I said, okay, yeah, sure, I can do that. So we did that. And according to AOL's lawyers, who have evidently a lot of spare time, they called me about 10 years after that and said, we're ready to sue everyone on the planet, because they ended up owning the rights to that code that I wrote back then. And we think that that's the first use of online avatars in gaming. And we own the patent on, or the copyright, or patent. We own the patent on online avatars, and it's because of the work that you did on this, a constant companion on the Sierra Network. And I said, okay, well, you guys have fun with that because I ain't gonna get no money out of this. This isn't gonna happen. So the best I understood, they decided that it wasn't worth going after everybody and suing, so it never happened. But as far as I know, and as far as AOL's lawyers could ascertain, Mark Stevenson and I, Jeff Stevenson and I, created online avatars. I assure you, it was nothing. I mean, nothing compared to what's now. Back then it was something. I was proud of it. But it turned out that was a real long-range dream. After 3 or 4 months, I realized that I don't get paid until the game ships and sells, and it was like, this is never going to ship. This is going to be years. We're not going to get anything out of this. I can't afford to sit here, so I'll do another game. And the sales department said, "Oh, you got to do another Larry. You got to do." I said, "Well, I've already done 3, and I finished it all up, and it's all over." "Yeah, but you got to do another Larry. You got to do another." Okay. So I said, "All right." So I went home. I started thinking, well, what can I do? He said, I've painted myself into a corner here. I don't know how to get out of this. So I went back to the office at Sierra, and I ran into somebody in the hallway that I hadn't seen in years. And she said, "Hey, Al, how you doing?" "Great, okay, great. Yeah, what are you working on now?" "Larry 4?" And like a smart ass, I said, "No, Larry 5. Of course I'm working." Hey. Maybe. I went home, and that one smart-ass remark became the whole basis for skipping Larry 4 and going straight into Larry 5. And it's been a source of laughs for me personally for 25 years. It also turned into a great marketing ploy, which that didn't even enter my mind. But the salespeople said that when they would go out to stores and they'd say, "Well, look, Larry 5's coming," and everybody they talked to said, "Wait, what happened to Larry 4?" And you just kind of got into their brains, and it just kind of got your attention, and so it turned out to be a fun way to do it. And throughout Larry 5, I made references to the things you remembered happening in Larry 4. It could have been anything, but that's the truth as to why there was the skip 4. It was a matter of complexity. But, so anyway, then I did some other games. Larry 5 was our first game that didn't have typing and had just the mouse cursors. And boy, we didn't realize how much we thought we were being very clever with our puzzles and stuff, and it turned out no, we were just given typing tests because everybody got through Larry 5 really quickly, and they all said, "Well, this is too easy." And so then Larry 6 and the games after that, the same thing happened with Roberta's games and Scott's games. All of those first games we did after the typing went away, we realized, oh man, we got to do a lot more work. Because it was the typing that was killing everybody, picking out the right words, spelling it correctly, and all that other stuff. So anyway, with Larry 6, I felt like I had a great team in place. We had a really good handle on it, and Sierra went from AGI to SCI. Now, those 3 letters aren't very different, but oh my God, the language was. One, AGI was kind of like C, and SCI was kind of like C++, and if you know the difference between those two, it was even worse than that. We asked Jeff to give us, the engineer who designed both engines, we asked him for better resolution and for the ability to access CD-ROM drives and to use speech. And instead we got a whole new world, a whole different way of writing text, a way of writing language, a way of storing things. Everything changed. Everything changed. Instead of adding on a little bit here and all of us knowing what to do, instead it was like, go back to school, you're in kindergarten, you'll have to learn this yourself. And of course, he was quite helpful in that he kept his mouth shut and wouldn't tell any of us anything that was going on. So we all had to figure it out together. So Scott and all of us, it just ended up, it was a nightmare to change over. But it did set us up to do great things in the future. We produced the first game that had CD-ROM support. We produced the first games that had digitized voices. We had produced the first games that had digitized music playback as opposed to MIDI and other things. So that part was really good. So it wasn't until Larry 7, I guess, which was 10 years after Larry 1, that I really sat down to design the game and thought to myself, I know what I'm doing now. Maybe I think I can actually do this without help and without making big mistakes. And that game shipped and sold quite well. The company made a lot of money on it, and everything was fine. And then this thing we're going to talk about tomorrow happened, and the company went through serious management turmoil, to the extent that the head of game development was a guy who previously had sold crackers for Nabisco.
Wait, what?
Yeah, exactly what we said. It was just crazy that the company just started this death spiral, and every few weeks you'd see some good people jump ship and go someplace better, and you would see more of the bad stuff encouraged, and then more good people would leave, and they made terrible decisions. They would put a lot of money into a project and then cancel it, or they would take it off down this way and then realize, oh, that's not going to work, so erase all that and we'll go this way instead. And just horrible things happened. And so within, and I was told that they wouldn't do any more adventure games because adventure games don't sell. And I said, well, you could see the sales numbers. I made money. I didn't cost you a lot of money. I made you a lot of money. What part of that didn't you like? Well, but they're not first-person shooters. Well, no, they're not, but there's a market for that. There's still an audience. They bought these other, but that didn't work. And at some point around 1998, I think, I got a phone call one day that said, come in, get your stuff out of the office because we need to make it into a closet or something. I don't know what the excuse was. So I went in and packed up all my stuff and went home and looked at my bank balance and said, I don't know, you think we can retire on this much money? So we did. We tried, and we had some good investments that worked out for us. And I got out of the stock market in late 1999, which helped a lot. And then I bought a bunch of bargains in the year 2001. So anyway, that was my story of Larry. It was a 10-year period of my life where I worked my ass off. I probably didn't do a very good job of parenting or being a husband, but I did earn enough money because of Ken Williams' stupidity to offer me royalties instead of salary. Because I'm sure if he'd have said, well, just stay on and work for a few dollars less, I probably would have said, sure, yeah, I'll probably do that, yeah. This was fun. I mean, making games is a hoot. I don't know how many of you guys are involved in software, but if you make video games, there's not a lot of better ways to make a living. I mean, you think about what I did. I came up with this crazy idea, and I would tell the guys who worked for me, I I want you to create an exercise room where people have to work out in order to lose weight, and then I want it to be in a jungle, and I want to have buildings over here, and I want these characters to look like this, and the chief of the local tribe is going to give you a test where you have to code an assembly language, and I mean whatever crazy thing I came up with, and suddenly it would be there, it would be part of the story. And the part of it that I didn't realize at the time, that I only realized in 1999 or so, after I retired and put up a website. I grabbed allowe.com, which is a 6 letters domain. That's a pretty cool domain. I wanted Lowe.com, and I called back then you could go to Whois and find out actual information about people. And so I went to Whois and I found out who owned Lowe.com, and I called him, and his wife answered. And she said, oh, he's not here right now. He's at work. And I said, oh, is he at the office? You have that number? She, oh, yeah, sure. Here's the number. So she gives me his number. I called him, and I said, I noticed you don't have a website for Lowe.com. Could I have it? It's, and he said, no, I've been using that for my email address and stuff for the past 12 years. Well, this was 1995, I think. And I said, 12 years? What do you do? He said, oh, I was one of the people that started ARPANET. So he ended up selling that to Lowe Boats, I think. So I'm sure he made a ton of money, because if you go to Lowe.com now, it's a boat company, and Lowe's with an S is the hardware store. But yeah, so anyway, I grabbed Lowe.com and was happy to do so. But my point was that I started this website, and just on a whim, I stuck a line over in a corner and said, if you want to email Al, click here or something. And I put up that link to email people, and I thought, this may be a horrible mistake. But it turned out to be just a real joy, because over the 20 years that I've had the website, I've received hundreds of thousands of emails from people. While I was doing the games for the 15 years that I worked at Sierra, I never got feedback from anybody. Well, I got a spreadsheet. Every month I would get a spreadsheet, and there were rows of numbers. And, this number was SKU number such and such, and that was Winnie the Pooh in the 100-Acre Woods for the Atari 800 computer for, 5 1/4-inch floppies. And this was Donald Duck's Playground for the IBM PC for 3 1/2-inch discs, and, stuff like that. And then there would be some numbers. And then over here, there was a little number that was the number of dollars that I got from all those sales. And that spreadsheet, towards the end, it was 7, 8, 9 pages of little tiny print. So you would just page through, and I had hundreds of SKUs. SKUs is a stock keeping unit, SKU. But I had hundreds of SKUs, all these different products for different computers, for different disc sizes, for magazine covers, and all kinds of stuff like that. So when people ask me, how many copies did Larry sell? I have to say, no one knows, because by the time you add in all the magazines and the compilations and the various machines and the formats and the translations into Italian and the translations into Portuguese, and let's see, the fact that we had the Portuguese translator was working on a separate kind of deal where he would do something. It was just incredibly complex, and so nobody ever added up all those numbers. So as far as I know, I can't tell you how many. I know it was in the millions, but you got to understand, there weren't many computers around back then that could run these things. you guys were all, if you were playing the games back then, you were pioneers, you know. It wasn't like you grab your phone and download a game. It was, you know, that would have been pretty fun, pretty easy. So anyway, that's the story of my time, and what I started to say was that the hundreds of thousands of emails that I got convinced me that the games had had an impact on people like you. That by reading those numbers on a spreadsheet, I got the idea that I must be selling a lot of boxes, you know? What never, and this is, I know this sounds stupid and I'm ashamed to admit it, but none of us ever put together the fact that each one of those numbers and each one of those boxes meant that somebody was sitting in front of their computer for hours and hours and hours trying to figure out what the hell did he want me to do here. So, oops, sorry, but yeah. So anyway, it wasn't until I got the website up and I started getting emails from people that I really realized that the games had really had an impact on a lot of people in a lot of places. So for a while, I posted a lot of those, and then after a while, it just got to be too much. And but I've gotten letters from people who said that they have fond memories because they played my games with their brother, and he, you know, just passed away from cancer or something. And it was like, this is my fondest memory that I have with him. And somebody else said, I was never close to my dad, but he and I played Larry together, and it was the one time we could communicate, you know. and just stuff like that that really has been heartwarming and enjoyable. And I got to tell you, as far as I know, every email that's ever come in off that website, I have given an answer. Usually I'll try to answer, if somebody writes me a really long one, I'll write a fairly long one back. If they write a short one, I'll tend to write a short one. But I think I've answered every one of those emails, and I know it's in the hundreds of thousands. So, but I feel, I don't know, obligation. Yeah, maybe sense of obligation is the right phrase, because of you guys, I was able to retire at age 52. I was able to, you know, have a nice life and to really make a living doing something that I would have done for free. I mean, don't tell anybody, but well, I guess it's not a secret anymore, because a lot of people do write games for free nowadays, right? And that's not an uncommon practice today. But yeah, I really I enjoyed what I did, and I had a hoot of a time doing it. And you know, I was sorry to see it end, particularly to end in the sad way that it did. Fortunately, Ken and Roberta came out of it okay, and a lot of the rest of us have come out okay. But it was really sad to see at one time. I don't know if you guys know this, but at one point, in just about the time that Ken lost control of the company, Sierra got 28 cents of every dollar spent on home entertainment software. Wow is right, man. I think that's an amazing number today. Nobody has numbers like that. EA never got close, and it wasn't until Sierra, you know, went into the deck that the other companies rose up and took over those numbers. But yeah, we had a 28% market share. Part of it was that our stuff wasn't cheap. We charged a fair price for games, and part of it was that we were pretty much at the cutting edge of things back then. But another part of it was that we were so widespread. At Sierra, when I started there, nobody will believe this, but when I started there in 1982, Sierra had the #1 word processor in the world, for the Apple II. They had the #1 database manager in the world. They had games galore. They had the fastest most reputable assembly language assembler. They were widely diversified. And at the end, the other end, in the mid-90s, they had a wonderful driver's education program that taught my daughter to drive. I bought her a little steering wheel and gear shift and stuff. And I'm telling you, the first time she got behind the wheel of the car, I just rode along with her. She knew how to drive.
Wow.
She had drove learning to drive on Sierra's driving simulator. And not only that, they had a home design program, a landscape design program. They had military games. They had RPGs. They had all this stuff. And instead, they pissed it all away trying to make games that were copies of other games and bringing them out a year late and wondering why they didn't sell. So that's a sad part of the story. I don't want to get into that today, but we'll do that another time. So, oh my God, I talked too much.
No, you didn't.
I'm sorry. I'm a teacher, you know. I was used to doling out 50-minute lectures. That's all I had. But I got to put in a commercial now. For the past 19 years, every weekday morning, I've sent out 2 jokes to my mailing list. One of those 2 jokes is clean. And you can figure out the rest. But if you want to wake up in the morning and with a smile, I'll send you 2 jokes every morning, and it costs you nothing. I just do it because I love telling jokes and I love helping people laugh. And I also have a website that's full of stories like this, and a lot of humor as well. But lots and lots of inside Sierra stories, and it's only 6 letters. Remember, I couldn't get the 4-letter one, but it's allow.com. So that's my commercial.
We're here till Monday in the Walk of Fame area. Al has some awesome stuff. He's got some 8x10s that he's signing. He's got some shirts. I know he's doing like $20 for the autographs and the shirts. And again, I'm involved in the Space Quest stuff. I got some beautiful artwork that Mark Crow from Space Quest made. I'll be signing that stuff for free if anybody wants it. So I'll be here till Monday as well. So, all right, guys, thanks for coming out.